Well, I'm looking forward to peeling back the layers. So thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it as well.
So let's start our journey with this. 5 years ago, the pandemic started, and it threw so many things into the unknown. But ultimately, surviving that time period, how much of getting through that has still existed today in what you're doing?
It's interesting because actually, so I'm in business, but I'm moving into a sort of ministry, if you want to call it that. So there are two different things. But from a business standpoint, what happened during the pandemic really kind of did an upheaval. On the business side, I help real estate agents generate new listings. It's
Yeah,
a small business called Agent Dominator. And so when the pandemic hit and everything kind of clamped down, their business stopped.
yeah.
And that created a big crimp on my business. And then as things started to release, our business started to pick back up, but it hasn't been the same since. There's been this ripple effect, not only in just the real estate market, but there's kind of this ripple effect throughout the economy of things trying to get back to. There is no longer the normal that we used to experience years back. It's always the new normal, and that new normal constantly changes and keeps moving. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've experienced with the pandemic.
So if we had to get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2025, if I
Yep.
put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, it's career day, and one of the kids is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Well, I'm going to be pretty uh, uh, provocative with them. I heal people,
Okay, okay.
but actually, it's not me. What I've done, sort of the short background, Joe, is I was born into a line of seven generations of medical doctors, seven consecutive generations. And back then, the doctors were scientists. They tried to understand the laws of the human body to then bring healing. As I mentioned, I went into business, but then about 9 years ago, the Lord moved me into healing, to kind of pray for people. Not a religious thing. I don't want this to be kind of this is more of a scientific approach to spiritual laws and prayer. And over the years, in perfecting a process, and how do you pray to this, either the God of the universe or this higher power, whoever it is that created everything, how do you consistently pray in a way that He will consistently heal all your issues? And so I developed a four-step process that is just a simple process in prayer that if someone has chronic pain or anxiety or depression or addictions or things of that sort, I've seen about statistically measured about an 87% success rate, and those things totally disappearing within 24 hours or less. And so, if I was in front of a bunch of little grade school kids, I tell them I heal people, or I teach people how to get this God of the universe to actually heal them when doctor and medicine can't figure it out.
So what did you want to be at that age? What was your dream life?
Uh, I wanted to be a doctor because that's what my dad was.
Yeah.
And then as I went into college, I started learning about business and replicatable income. And I looked at my dad, and he worked an average of 80 to 100 hours a week. He was a critical care surgeon. So when they needed him, it was a life and death emergency. And you'll see some pictures on my walls. I love to travel.
Yeah.
And my dad never traveled with us. So I decided I didn't want what my dad had. I wanted the lifestyle I had with my dad, but I wanted to participate in it. And so that sent me in a trajectory of business. But business was always somewhat empty, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
My dad and my lineage was all about really helping others and helping them in a very meaningful way, something with their life. Business is just making money. So I was really earning and leaning towards how do I shift to make an impact in people's lives? Because if you can't make an impact in their lives, nothing else really matters. So that's where I was, and that's where I've kind of been headed today in what I do.
So where are you located? I meant to ask you up front.
Yeah, I'm in Alabama.
Okay,
So
excellent.
for international listeners, that's the Southeast United States.
Yeah. And I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, so we're kind of
Okay,
generally in kind of the same region, so to speak,
right.
instead of being on the coasts. But so I'm curious. Who's been that hero for you? Who's been that inspirational force for you to do all of this work that you're doing?
I'm not sure there was really hero. Um, like I'm about to be on another podcast in a little while, not today, but in the short future. And this gal interviews people about their favorite book. Okay, so if I could go to that favorite book concept,
Yeah.
for me, it's the Bible, but it's the the supernatural side of what God does. A lot of times we struggle in life, and yet there are things that we can't overcome, but we know that a higher power can. And to be able to just tap into that, that was always a fascination for me. Now, remember, this was 9 years ago when this happened. I was watching on Netflix of all places. There was a series of a three-part series of movies where someone was almost like a reality show. They were just walking around with these guys, videoing, and they would just walk up to people in the park or in a mall or places that obviously had health issues. They were limping, they had on braces or whatever, and they would just pray and they would be healed. And that really lit a spark in me that couldn't be dimmed. And the more I would watch that, the more that spark grew into a flame. And so I think that that underlying drive, if you think in terms of, a lot of times we see things come down to generationally, like someone's a military officer and there's a whole line of military officers. Someone else, you see other generation, like you have cancers coming down all the way down the line. So we see these patterns. And the pattern that I've seen is this pattern, I'll call it a mantle of helping others. And so that was kind of like a squashed dream that I didn't realize I had until I saw this on video. And I started realizing, wow, this really does happen. Because the church I go to didn't believe in any of that. It was a very legalistic church. Um, and so all that was kind of poo-pooed away. And I just I wanted it, but I didn't think it was possible. And then I saw it happening, and I
Yeah.
thought, that's what I want.
Yeah. So, the one thing about being spiritual and having a sense of a higher power that exists,
Yeah,
that we all have these moments where we realize there's an actual existence of a deity, of a God, no matter what religion you subscribe to.
right. Exactly.
Was there a moment like that for you where like the curtains were parted and you were like, I know, like almost empirically, scientifically speaking, in my heart that this exists.
Yeah. So there's two moments. One was in college. Um, And, being in the South, I'm in the Bible Belt of the South. That means churches, there's three churches on every corner, right? Almost. And it's a social thing to go to church. And so you hear about God, you hear about these things. But it really became real for me in college, where as I was just reading through the Bible, something happened and it just kind of like it all came alive. And the only thing I can really describe it is I couldn't read it enough. It was just like I'm drawn into it. But then things kind of died down. And it wasn't until it was October 2016. I had been studying this approach of, does God really heal? Because I've been taught God doesn't heal. He
Yeah.
can, but he really doesn't. And then something flipped a switch in my life. And I decided to go out to Walmart and just pray and see what happened. And I would walk up to people who were obviously in pain, like they're walking with a crutch, or they're riding one of those little electric scooters in Walmart because they can't walk themselves. And so I just walked up to people and said, "Hey, I'm out praying for people. It looks like you're in pain. Can I pray for you?" And a third of those people were instantly healed. And when that, I mean, like degenerative disc and lupus and arthritis and RSD and things that doctors say is incurable. And when that happened, that was one of the biggest aha moments for me that says, this is real. There's something that defies what we think about and understand in the natural. And then one of the things I started to do is I started to test. And I call it the science of spiritual laws because anytime there's some laws out there, you can always test it. For example, you have a physical science, and I can take my pen, and if I let go of my pen, it's going to drop. And if you were to pick up your pen, Joe, and hold it and then let go of it, it's going to drop as well. So now we can determine through empirical data, things that we observe, that there's a law that affects both you and me. Doing the same activity, you get the same outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I started to apply that in the role of praying for healing. And I started to find that there's the same pattern. It doesn't matter what someone believes, doesn't matter what religion they're with, or even if they're atheists, that if you simply pray through this particular pattern, then nearly 90% of the time, whatever they're ailing with, that you can feel like a pain or a sickness or anxiety or things like that, would disappear.
Yeah.
And so I started to realize that these spiritual laws are real, but all that began October 2016 when I started to pray for people and they were healed. And I said, I need to understand more. So I started to press in. Before too long, 90% of the people I was praying for were instantly healed. And then through a series of events, uh, I prayed for people and nothing happened. And I'd go to God in prayer and say, what happened? He said, well, I took that gift away, and now you have to learn how to do it through my laws. And so that's when I started to apply the things I'd been learning in prayer and now teaching someone else just to pray through a simple process. And I saw now the same number, same percentage of people being healed, but now it was much more dramatic. Um, and and that's what really caught me a flame that said, either God or this higher power, whatever this thing is out there that we don't really understand. It's like you mentioned, we all know there's some God out there. Every religion focuses on something in the spiritual side of things. We call it different names. And whether if I call you Joe or Joseph or Bill, if I'm talking to you, you know I'm talking to you. It doesn't matter what name I call you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I found with this God in the universe. And he knows that we're talking to him. And when we apply these specific rules, his laws always produce the same outcome.
So what motivates you every day to wake up to do the work that you do? What is it that gets you up to not only help other people, but to
Yeah.
take care of yourself and your spirit, your soul?
There's a book with a title that answers that question, and it's called From Success to Significance. What gets me up is not trying to be successful. I'm successful enough with what I do, and I don't yearn for anything greater, um, but to become significant, to be able to, like, I'll tell you, like, I teach at a women's addiction recovery center. It's the largest recovery center in the United States. They house over 500 women, and I teach there as a volunteer. And my classes that I teach are the top classes in terms of interest and desire. And one of them is how to get free. And let me just, I'll read you a story, a short thing.
Sure.
So I teach this, and I teach these ladies how to get free. And this is just one of them. And you ask, what gets me up in the mornings? And this is a lady named Catherine who was in my class at the Addiction Recovery Center. And this is the thank you note that she sent me. This is in my book, by the way, for your audio listeners,
Yes.
videos, The Prayer of Freedom.
Yes.
So she said, I want to thank you for the prayer of freedom. The prayer of freedom is the structured process I put together that people can go through. I want to thank you for the prayer of freedom. It has changed my life. Growing up, my relationship with my mom was really tough. She was abusive, and she and my stepdad would drink and get into lots of fights. By the time I was in seventh grade, she said she didn't want anything to do with me and left. That's when life began spiraling downward. By 16 years old, I was having sex with lots of boys and started getting into drugs. That was just over 10 years ago. Before doing this prayer process, I was addicted to heroin and fentanyl and meth. I had a lot of worry and stress and anxiety. On a scale of 1 to 10, they were probably an 8. I've had constant allergies and sinus headaches for years, migraines 5 out of 7 days a week, and a super heavy feeling like I was carrying around an extra overweight backpack every day. Life has really been difficult. But the prayer of freedom has changed everything. Literally, everything is gone. No more sinus issues, all gone. No more headaches and migraines, all gone. No more heaviness, it's all gone. No more anxiety or stress or worries. Literally, on a scale of 1 to 10, they've all gone to zero. Even my addictions have gone down to zero. I don't want drugs anymore. I have no urges for them anymore. And even the thought of any drug disgusts me. It's all gone. This is what gets me up in the morning because, just like my lineage of medical doctors, the only reason you went into medicine back then is not like today, or like it used to be. Used to be if you go into medicine, you make a lot of money. And so a lot of people would move into medicine for money. But back in those days, it was to help your fellow man. And a lot of times you would help someone and all they could give you in payment is a chicken. So you would take a chicken in payment because it was appropriate for them and it really wasn't about the money. It was about serving. And that's why I'm driven to get up is it's all about serving, sort of about lifting them up and helping people who have no other options. They've tried everything. They're living in either in chronic pain and torment or just things that they don't even realize is not normal. For most people, just having a crazy mind and you just can't stop it, it's just normal. Like one of my neighbors has a license tag that says, I run to get rid of the crazies, right? And she thinks that's normal, but yet all that is something that this prayer of freedom approach can instantly disappear. And now she can have a life that she's never experienced. So that's what drives me.
It's interesting. You were talking about your dad going into these very high pressure situations,
Yeah.
performing surgery. I couldn't imagine being on that level. I mean, I'm sure over time you do it enough where it becomes a part of the magnanimousness of the humanity that's a part of that has to be put away because you're doing something. It almost seems like to me you're doing parts of that as well, going into these rooms where it really is like with this woman, it's almost life and death. There's a chance that if you didn't run into her, it was going to lead to a really, really bad place. So
Right.
do you ever
I mean, it
think
already
about
led
that?
to a bad place, right?
What?
Her life had spiraled down already.
Well, true. So it would have been the bottom would have been possibly death. So do you see yourself kind of following in that level of footstep?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way I've analyzed it is my generations past were they practiced the science of medicine for healing. I now practice the science of prayer for healing.
Yeah.
It's the science both ways.
Yeah.
It works regardless of religion, but I'm helping people do what medicine back then and medicine today cannot do. I mean, like let me tell you another story. This is really cool. So, one of the other ladies, her name is Jacqueline. She was in my class. This was just now it's like 8 weeks ago. But she was in a sling in a class, and I was asking what happened. She said she had major surgery. So the backstory is 3 years earlier, she had a car wreck, went through the windshield, broke her AC and her collarbone, shoulder bone. And she didn't have insurance, so they just gave her a sling and it sat. Now, if you know anything about major broken bones, if you don't set it, you just hold it in a sling, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So now she comes to the addiction recovery center. They have insurance. So she goes to the orthopedic surgeon and he says, I'm going to fix you, but it's going to be incredibly invasive. I'm going to have to drill through the bones, break them apart, reset them, tie it together, and then it's going to be 12 weeks before you can be of recovery and lots of physical therapy thereafter. So in the class, I was just leading everyone in class through the simple prayer process. And I was asking her after it was over, how does it pain? Because it was like on 10 before. And she said, I don't think there's no pain. I don't feel any pain. I said, well, look, take off your sling and move it around and see what your range of motion is. So it was her left arm and she's raising it like this. And I'm having her match it with her right arm. And she has the exact same range of motion as her right arm. So
Wow.
this was 4 weeks after the surgery. She goes back to the doctor 2 weeks later. He's flabbergasted. He's been doing this stuff for 20 years. He's never seen anything like this. And she was telling me, she's one of my, I've got her on camera as a testimony, but she was telling me that her range of motion is identical to where it was before the accident. And so think about what would have happened normally. She would have suffered through the 12 weeks of recovery, then physical therapy, and never fully get that range of motion back because man really can't do what God can do. God can create what I'll call a miracle. All we have to do is let Him. And that's, that's the type of things I'm seeing. So it's a quality of life. It's it's living at a level that most people, especially if they've had a lot of issues in life and a lot of trauma and things of that sort, that they never even thought that a life of that level could actually occur for them, but it really can. And that drives me, and that's what I'm seeing with my generations. We're all carrying that same thing of bringing quality of life.
The one thing I'm sure about reaching people is that people humanize those that are helping them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you were to walk into a room with all of the people that you've taught and that you've known in different business capacities, and you walked up to a podium and you could tell them one fun thing or one fun story about you, what would you tell them?
um, I'm an incredibly uh, an introvert. At my 30th high school reunion, I brought a book, found a table to go sit down and read. My wife and I were in the same class. And so while she was out visiting, I was sitting down reading a book at my reunion. So that's
Wow,
me. Most
that's
people would
interesting.
never think because I have a great stage presence.
Yeah.
Um, but in a private setting, I'm quite an introvert.
Interesting. So, of everything that you've done and evolved into and achieved in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Well, I take no credit for it, but I'm the most pleased um, with what I'm doing with the Prayer of Freedom
Yeah.
because it's the only thing that's meaningful. Besides my relationship with God and raising my kids to uh, no daddy issues, they're all adults now, and we've had no issues. Everything's been just amazing relationship wise. I guess if from an earthly standpoint, those would be things I'm proud of.
Yeah.
Um, just doing the right things and imparting that to the children. And as they've grown up, they they compare our family with the family of their friends and say, "Dad, thank you so much. I realize we're different," and they realize that it came from me and my wife.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, colleagues, everyone that you're teaching and healing and helping. But ultimately, you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Without sounding too spiritual, but it's the only way I can do it. Share. Uh, I'm a child of God who is pursuing my Heavenly Father. I mean, it's with as few compromises as possible. That's who I am.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to pick up a copy of the Prayer of Freedom, they want to reach out, they want
Yep.
to get involved, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
So if you just had the word book, because at the end of the title, the Prayer Freedom Book.com, then that gets you straight where you need to go. You've got information about me. There are discounts on the book. You can click a button, it'll take you straight to the page at Amazon for it. Because if you typed in like Prayer Freedom somewhere, there's so many books on prayer and freedoms and all kinds of stuff, you'll get lost in the jumble.
Yeah.
But if you go to theprayerfreedombook.com, then you'll find it and get all my information.
Wonderful. This has been great. Thank you so much for your story. What a hopeful, wonderful ray of light in this world that we need so much these days.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you again for being on your show.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.